Are you going to write excerpts from an Imperial Affliction in real book form? So Hazel and Augustus really love this book, An Imperial Affliction, which is written by an American now living in Holland of Dutch descent named Peter Van Houten, and it is a book that does not exist. Although, I will say, if you Google, is Peter the first thing that comes up is Peter Van Houten real? So that worked. No, I will never write an Imperial Affliction. It's not the kind of book that I would enjoy writing, and I don't think it's the kind of book. I mean, it's just not. An Imperial Affliction, David Foster Wallace used to call a certain kind of writing, "Look, Mom, no hands." And an Imperial Affliction is very much that kind of writing, and Peter Van Houten is generally very much that kind of writer. There is a lot about Peter Van Houten that I am scared lurks inside of me, but there is no desire inside of me to write an Imperial Affliction, although I do think that it's probably, in some ways, a better novel than any novel I'll ever write. Just as the Hectic Glow are a better band than any band. I just answered that. Do you think we all fear oblivion to a certain extent? I think to a great extent. Yeah, I mean, well, here's the problem. It's very, very difficult. When you are busy having a conscious mind, it's very, very difficult to imagine that being taken away from you or that being taken away from people you love and care about, and it's sort of a terrible thing to have to contemplate. But it's also a really important thing to be conscious of, because when we are aware of the fact that the gift of consciousness is something that is given to us only for a little while, I really do believe that it helps us pay attention. It helps us pay attention, it helps us use our time here wisely and thoughtfully and in a way that's committed to the welfare of others. So I think it's an important thing to think about, it's an important thing to be conscious of, but if you are in a position where you are fearing oblivion or fearing some kind of permanent end in a way that is completely crippling and paralyzing, then it's not doing what it's supposed to do. I mean, I'm not going to make an argument about oblivion today, because I don't particularly care to get in a theological fight. But I mean, but that's what the novel is devoted to in a lot of ways. It's devoted to Hazel and Augustus's different, but both legitimate, both thoughtful, both, you know, firmly held and carefully thought out positions on eternality. And I think that they're both perfectly, you know, legitimate. And one of the things that I like most about Hazel and Augustus is that they are able to care for each other very deeply while still disagreeing. Dear John, what inspired you to write The Fault in Our Stars from a girl's perspective? Well, I just thought that it would be super awkward to read at gatherings like this. And I was like, how can I make this really awkward for me? Well, I wanted it mostly because I wanted to invert the typical heroic, the typical who's the hero and who's the beloved, I guess. And I wanted to invert that, like, not at first, but sort of as the book went on. So hopefully I did that okay. But also generally I wanted to write, you know, young women in particular, I think, are told, when they're sick, are told that they are strong and that they are fighters. And of course all of that is true, but they're strong because they have to be strong, and they're fighting because there's no, they would just be perfectly happy, I'm sure, not to be sick. So that was really what inspired that. Do you think any teenagers really talk as intelligently as Hazel and Augustus?
Yes.
I have two answers to that question, and I'm going to answer completely honestly, so forgive me. The first answer is yes, but not many. But it's really important to note that, in my opinion at least, the answer is yes. I think there are a lot of hyper-intellectual teenagers in America, and I'm kind of tired of them being ignored. And being told that they aren't as smart as the characters they like reading about, or being told that they can't possibly be eloquent or thoughtful simply because they're 16. One of the things that one often reads when one reads all of one's reviews is someone saying, "I'm 25 and I don't sound like that." To which my response is, well, it's not my fault that I'm 34, and there are a lot of 16-year-olds who are smarter than I am. And I'm conscious of that, and I don't take it as an affront in any way. The second thing, and the more important thing to note, is that I'm not really interested in reflecting any kind of technical reality in my novels, and that should be pretty obvious, like the fact that, for instance, I wrote a book about a guy who dated 19 girls, all of whom were named Catherine. That's uncommon. It's uncommon to the point of a sort of technical absurdity. And I like writing, I mean, novels to me inherently should embrace their fictionality. They shouldn't try to deny that they are works of fiction. Now, that's my position, and there are lots of other legitimate positions to take on that subject, and I'm not going to claim to have any kind of special knowledge about that. But my responsibility as a novelist, in my mind, is not to tell you how teenagers actually sound, but how they feel like they sound. Like what their experience of their intellectual engagement is, and what their experience of their conversations are. But I do think that teenagers are quite clever. Perhaps not as consistently clever as Hazel and Augustus. But then again, there are also lots of things that Hazel and Augustus say that I didn't write down, which is also worth remembering. Did you find yourself falling in love with Augustus Waters? I definitely did. I mean, yeah. He's a very nice boy. And he's handsome, and it's nice when someone who's good looking is very, very focused on you. The truth of the matter, though, is that almost everything that's interesting about Gus and about loving Gus is not in his Augustusness, I think, but in his Gusness. Like, Hazel talks about how she likes that Gus has two names, that you can call him either Augustus or Gus. And for a long time in the novel, she usually calls him Augustus, and for a long time in the novel, she usually calls him Gus. And I think, Augustus is a big, grand, Roman emperor name, and Gus is the name for a little baby or a caterpillar or something. And I know. That was my joke. I like this book called Gus is a Bug. When someone comes into your life and you really like them, or they really like you, there is this intense moment of romanticization that goes on for a certain amount of time where you're like, this person could be perfect. Could be kind of like God. Like a hot person. And then what you slowly realize is that that is not, in fact, the case at all. But often, if you're lucky, what replaces that is a fragile, vulnerable, human person struggling with how to orient their lives and what should matter to them, and feeling weak and lonely and afraid, and you still like that person. And that's the journey that I kind of have never charted in any of my novels, that I wanted to try to chart in The Fault in Our Stars, is coming to that kind of love, the love that you can have for a Gus, as well as the kind of love that you can have for an Augustus. And so really, the parts of the novel where I feel like closest and most affectionate toward Gus are the parts where he's kind of a little kid freaking out. For instance, I won't tell you about that, because it would result in me getting shocked. Instead, I will bring out my brother to answer, and we will answer some questions together.